Neil Christians will be doing our reading this morning. Welcome, Neil.
Okay, can I move over here? And get
Yeah,
in
sure,
front?
honey. There you go.
Okay, this week we haven't got anything from previous centuries or centuries before those even. We've got breaking news from this Thursday. This is from Pluralistic, which is a website run by Cory Doctorow, an author of science fiction, but also a commentator on economics, intellectual property, technology, etc., etc. A very perceptive kind of a fellow. And he is explaining for us what just happened this week with Reddit, Wall Street Bets, and GameStop. Some of you may have heard of this, but be a little bit puzzled about what's going on. And he wrote this fine article that explains it in plain language. I've pulled out all the plain language. I'm going to read the plain language part of it to you with just a few parenthetical explanations. There are more details in his article, which was on the Pluralistic website, which I think is his website. First, you need to understand the underlying mechanics of the story. Stock markets are fundamentally a way of making bets, including bets on the outcome of other people's bets and bets on the outcomes of those bets. All this complexity creates lots of opportunities. Some of these opportunities are considered legitimate and are given respectable names like arbitrage. Others are considered illegitimate and are called disreputable things like stock manipulation. The difference isn't about any objective standard, but rather about power. The strategies of powerful people are legit, while the strategies of their would-be dethroners are not legit. Reddit's r/Wall Street Bets is a retail investor forum of average Joes, many of them angry at the scammy, evil stuff that the big institutional investors get up to. Their grievances are mixed. Some are angry that big investors have figured out how to destroy good businesses for money. Some are angry because only big institutionals get in on the action when that happens, and average Joes are locked out of those plays. They're getting together to make money and to punish their enemies. That would be the Wall Street Bets guys on Reddit. The easiest enemies to push are shorts. Those are people who sell stock they don't own with the hope that they can buy it back later cheap and thus make a profit. Because if the average Joes push up a stock even a little, the shorts get pounded for millions of dollars. If the average Joes can keep the stock up long enough, the shorts will give up and the average Joes will collect their winnings. Remember, the legitimacy of a financial strategy isn't determined by its objective decency, but rather by the power of the people who deploy it. If the average Joes can attain respectability, they may be legitimized, but the road to legitimacy is rocky. Yesterday, the finance monopolist TD Ameritrade, which is a company that just immigrated to the United States in October, by the way, although they've had Ameritrade as their name for a long time, halted trading on the stocks targeted by the average Joes. Today, Robinhood, which is the average Joe's broker in most cases, followed suit. Maybe they fear that they cannot control the monster they created.
Thank you, Will. That was really well done. And I think a lot of us, including me, have been, you're going to have to move over a little bit, have been curious about how this all works. So thank you so much.
So before getting into anything, I actually just, in relation to the reading that was read this morning, I saw a meme on Facebook that perfectly summarized just the state of the world. It was Pandemic Day 25. I made bread, smiley face. Day 95. I sure do miss my friends. Day 310. The White House appears to be under control of a shirtless man in a Viking helmet. Day 330. Reddit's coordinated attack on Wall Street is going just according as planned. I don't know. I found that very funny. And, yeah, so, first and foremost, I by trade, I'm a composer and a piano player. I'm here in New York City. But I actually got into meditation. I mean, realistically, I got into meditation maybe 12 years ago or so, but began being an active practitioner of Vipassana meditation for the last 10 years. A lot of it came to I had been raised Christian, and I left the church mentally when I was 13, literally when I was 25, which totally went smoothly with my entire family. But there was a certain element that did appear to be missing, but didn't quite know how to explain it. So the way I'm going to describe it just during this conversation, so when I use the word spiritual, I am not referring to anything regarding supernatural experiences. I am not speaking on behalf of anything regarding unprovable experiential realms or anything like that. It's literally just the easiest way to fluidly have a dialogue and get across that I'm speaking about something regarding the breath and emotional health. So just to give a little clarity in case that word does arise. But so anyways, I had left the church and was beginning to just learn things in a different way. Had always been interested in science, had always been interested in music, but it was actually the writings of Sam Harris who I came across, who had spoken very highly about meditation, and the two forms of meditation that he recommends the most, there's one called Dogshen and there's one called Vipassana. And through a Google search, yes, spirit comes from the Latin word spiritus, meaning breath. Correct. Thank you, Jeff. So I had done a Google search and found a 10-day silent meditation retreat called on Vipassana meditation. And I have now gone every year ever since. And I'll tell you right up front that it is 95% a very incredible experience, and 5% you kind of roll your eyes when they say certain things. So when I became a teacher of meditation 2 years ago, one of my missions has been to utilize the technique and the skill and the craft that comes from Vipassana meditation and the Buddhist tradition, but apply a humanist sense of skepticism and a humanist sense of research and scientific backing. Now, I will say just one last point of all of this. Human beings are very complicated. And believe it or not, a lot of the reasons that I was searching for this unknown spiritual dimension after not being involved with religion anymore, connected to I'm an Army veteran, and through various situations I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's something about PTSD and trauma where our processing just doesn't function quite right, and meditation has been something that has really helped me, along with medication and therapy. But it's become a part of my daily life. Uh, just giving myself some time to tune in to my body and just chill, basically. Um, but the thing that I was getting to was, so my professional life in New York City has been music composition, and I never finished a degree in music composition. I had gone to school for a brief period of time, dropped out, moved to New York, got a lot more of a career going in that area. You know, it's almost like the pragmatic approach was better than the academic approach for art making. So when I was in the midst of my girlfriend, now my wife, but when we were in the midst of talking about marriage and eventually starting a family, the discussion that I didn't have a degree came up. And having been involved with teaching at conservatories, Juilliard, Columbia, you know, all these high level places, it became sort of obvious that I didn't need to get a degree in music composition to do what I was already doing. So when looking for how can I apply musical knowledge, or what could I go to school for and earn a degree in, I ended up going back to school for music therapy. And the way that ended up coming about, a very good friend of mine from the military is a music therapist, and he works with veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. So that long-winded precursor is to explain that my knowledge base definitely comes from the world of abstract art as well as the world of psychology. I read a lot about neuroscience and biology and more of the hard sciences, but my expertise is really in other areas. So these are just some things, just so you know where my background is coming from. So this is just my slide that I use for my course. And the way that my course is run, it's divided into, we follow what's called the threefold mindfulness meditation path, which is utilizing calming of the mind, observing the mind, and analyzing the mind. And we finish all of this with a form of meditation called metta meditation, but translates to loving kindness. And the way it is each day a new technique is introduced. In the course, there's a 20-minute discourse, a 20-minute meditation, and a 20-minute discussion. So let me just give a little bit about what Vipassana meditation is and what it is not. So what Vipassana is not, it is not a religious rite or ritual. It is not a cure for everyday hardships and difficulties. It is not a substitute for medical or psychiatric treatment. It is not recommended for people with serious psychiatric disorders. Does not mean that people with serious psychiatric disorders cannot participate in meditation. It just takes a little bit more specialization from the teaching perspective. So what Vipassana is, it is a resource to help alleviate mental suffering. It is a form of mental fitness that can aid in strengthening our coping skills for daily stresses and challenges. And it is a useful tool in decreasing anxiety, increasing tranquility, and enhancing our quality of life and well-being. I put meditation into two mental categories, just to kind of help make it make sense in my own mind. The first mental category is, how do we define physical fitness? So, if you have a serious ailment, a life life-ending disease or a life-threatening disease, going to the gym or going on a jog is not going to stop this life ailment. But to enhance quality of life, you may go to the gym or go on a jog or do push-ups or something just to keep your body in decent working order. This is one thing that meditation is comparable to. We're using meditation to exercise the mind, to exercise consciousness. The second area that I kind of make a distinguishing point to, meditation is almost like art or music. Music is not something we necessarily need for basic survival. Music will not get you water. Music will not cure a disease. But what it will do is enhance the quality of life on the day-to-day experience. And in fact, music every day can expand your consciousness and expand the way that you perceive the world. Having the gift, the experience of being able to hear music and go through all of the emotions that may or may not arise. Meditation is very similar. So, the final thought before we do a bit of a meditation is that I don't ever want to come across as implying that meditation will save everybody, or that if you utilize meditation, your life will be better immediately. That is not the case. What meditation does is it gives us a little bit more of a tool to enhance the way we can examine our life in the present moment, and it gives us a little bit more power regarding making our own choices, regarding making decisions when certain sensations and certain feelings arise. And with that, we're going to start, and you don't have to do this, but if you are comfortable, would you be willing to close your eyes? If you are not comfortable, what you can do is keep them open and just look off into the distance, maybe fixing on an object. But the point is that we are going to be sitting in as comfortable of a position as we can, and sitting upright, preferably with the eyes closed, and just begin to breathe deeply and naturally through your nose, bringing awareness to any sensation that may arise on the areas of the nostril. you become aware that your mind is wandering, if you begin to daydream, or you begin to become distracted, or you begin to focus on anything other than right here, right now, simply bring your attention to the area right around the nostrils, bringing attention and awareness to any sensation, maybe an itching or a coolness, but simply breathing deeply and naturally through the nose. And the moment you become aware your mind has wandered, simply bring your attention back to the breathing. And the moment you become aware that your mind has wandered, you may simply open your eyes. So this is literally, I don't want to make an alcohol comparison, but this is like, instead of, having like a night out with friends, this was taking a shot of meditation practice, or this was just a sample of what really is a much more intensive practice. Or if we were going to make a physical fitness analogy, we just did one walk around half of the track as opposed to doing a full forced full on marathon. I am going to, just because of the nature of the way that I like to teach, and because this isn't a course, this is more of a I want to know what you want to know, I'd like to open up already to questions and or dialogue amongst everybody here.
Dorian, we do have a couple questions.
Yeah.
One was from Dave Gray.
Okay.
Which composer inspires you spiritually or inspires your music composition?
Okay, so there's a couple of realms for this. It depends on the piece, depends on the composition, depends on the reason for the composition. I'll tell you right off the bat, my first favorite composer was Sergei Rachmaninoff, who was he's considered one of the last Russian romantics, late 19th century, early 20th century. But I went on from him to Igor Stravinsky and Bela Bartok. When I was younger, Igor Stravinsky in particular, what he does is he takes a lot of very simple concepts. He'll take like a basic chord. I'm just going to make one up, like a C major triad. And he'll take another really simple chord, like an F sharp major triad. And these are things that are very clear, very precise when you hear them. But what Stravinsky does is he has them played at the exact same time, so all of a sudden it makes this really thick sound. So that's like the rough draft version of Igor Stravinsky. I am going to get to the inspirational part in a moment. As I've gotten older, I've become more drawn towards the music of Bela Bartok. Bela Bartok was a Hungarian composer in the late 19th century, early 20th century, who really was one of the first musicologists to go into the peasant villages and record folk musicians, and then he would transcribe their music. He would use that to start writing his compositions. And I'm actually really good friends with a string quartet based out in Nebraska called the Chiaria Quartet. They actually recently just disbanded. They had a 17-year career, and they're all now going their separate ways. But they did a project where they were doing all the Bartok string quartets by memory. And one thing that was really interesting, just learning their process, was that when they were reading the music for Bartok, it's all these complicated rhythmic things and all of this, like, like all these really wild overlapping rhythmic ideas and really angular melodic patterns. But they said that once they started internalizing the music, it all of a sudden became very clear that it was very fluid linear paths that he was taking directly from the village musicians that he was recording. So it's one of those things where sometimes something sounds incredibly simple, you transcribe it, it's really dense. To get one notch deeper and then two more notches deeper, and then I think that'll answer everything. I'm a huge I love the music of John Cage. If you're not familiar with his work, he's probably one of the most prolific composers for percussion and piano music. He's really considered an expert and an innovator in the field of music in incorporation to modern dance. He worked with Martha Graham and Merce Cunningham. He was actually Merce Cunningham's romantic partner for like 6 years or something. I made that number up, so in case don't look that up and be like, wait a second, it wasn't 60. But anyways, his most important piece historically is a piece called 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which was this incredibly shocking performance art that I've seen many a college student argue to the death over, where basically a pianist walks on stage, they bow, they sit down, they open the piano lid, they pull out a stopwatch, they hit start, they wait for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, they pause, they stand up, they bow, they walk off. The reason it's such a controversial piece is people always have the argument of like, well, that's easy. A 5-year-old could come up with that. And it's like, well, yes, except a 5-year-old didn't come up with this. This is like an incredibly profound, deep composer, and there's a reason he's decided to declare this piece of this time to become a piece of music. And there's a bit of a historical context to it as well. First and foremost, he got commissioned to write this piece, and it was getting premiered up at an amphitheater in Woodstock. And he was also, at that point, getting very into anarchism and Buddhism. And so when you start to realize that he had no idea it was going to be such a controversial piece, But his idea was like, well, how could I turn the amphitheater with all these amazing birds and trees and wind and everything? How could I turn that into a piece? And it was like, well, what if we just took that part out and declared this period of time to be a composition? So that's the first and foremost like area where he was coming up with this piece of music. But because of that angle of it, it ended up opening up a much larger question, which is, what is music? How do we define what music is? And it becomes, it influenced the way that I've started perceiving it, which is that music is organized sound through use of human intervention. Meaning that if a bird is singing, the bird is not singing for the purpose of making music. They are singing to communicate or to warn or to, mostly communication, really. However, if a human being translates, if a human being intervenes, oh, it sounds like a song. All of a sudden, it becomes music. The other part is that there's no easy way to define anybody's subjective concept of... I worked for Lamont Young. Sorry. I just saw a question come. Yeah, I know Lamont personally. But anyways, the reason why it's impossible to really describe a subjective definition of music is, if we do a thought experiment, we're going to take a 22-year-old African-American male from Detroit, and we're going to take this individual to 1923 rural Kentucky, and this gentleman is going to show his favorite music to all of the locals in 1923 Kentucky. Are they going to define music the same way? Probably not. It gets even further. I mean, how many of your parents didn't like the music that you listened to growing up? So it's impossible to really define the subjective experience of music in one simple way. So anyways, all of this to say is John Cage really influenced just my own spiritual practice in music making, and that it was, and I apologize for cursing. Is it okay if I curse? Can I? It's just like, holy shit, I have control over whatever I am deciding is now my piece of music. It's the same thing with the construction worker working outside of your window. It can be really loud. If you start to internalize it as some kind of pulsating rhythm, you can dance. Like it totally can happen. Those were sort of my traditional composers. I'm also very influenced by Thelonious Monk and Ornette Coleman and Sun Ra, which they're probably going to be coming up in the next couple questions anyways. So I'm gonna, just so I don't spend 30 minutes on this first question. So yeah, next one. I'm sorry, did that answer your question, David?
Dave, you did fine. That was good. Ingrid has a comment. I've recently been wondering if playing music around some of our protests might calm people down. How can anyone be violent while listening to YMCA, which makes you want to dance?
I will say, be careful what you wish for, because somebody might be able to show you how they could be violent to YMCA. But no, I do think music can definitely affect protests in one direction or another. The Pete Seeger is a very perfect example of somebody who utilized music to really push some kind of message or some kind of unity-oriented agenda. Now, specifically, so you're asking about, are you specifically asking about YMCA, or are you talking about just like joyous music that that might be able to calm down a protest environment?
Ingrid, do you want to come in and answer that?
So she's talking about just music in general, not a song, but just it's music in general being played.
Okay, okay. Yeah, no, it definitely can be used to calm people down. There are, so I live in Harlem, New York City, and there's actually a grocery store that intentionally plays classical music because it lowers the chances of of theft. There's something about, you know, and keep in mind, when I'm saying classical music, I'm talking like in the like, oh, the gentle, beautiful, if they were playing Igor Stravinsky, not the same response as if they're going to be playing a Mozart sonatina. But anyways, that does indicate that there is something with gentler music that can lower people's intensity levels. So yeah, I mean, that could be something to do. I would actually say, believe it or not, if the intention to stop energy taking place, because there's a lot of nuance to protest violence. Like, there's a lot of elements to it. Who is creating the violence? Why was the violence taking place? How long did it happen? Who was the violence being done to? Like, there are so many factors that need to be considered, that under some circumstances, music like YMCA could actually incite more, because all of a sudden there's energy in the air. Whereas most of the time probably wouldn't do it. It would probably cause happiness and joy. But there is nuance to that. Yeah. One just last example. The reason I do bring up hip hop music a lot, because I work with hip hop music with a lot of younger kids in music therapy. It calms them down, to be totally upfront. Like, I play what may come off as incredibly violent, intense hip hop music, and they're like in the zone. So, it's about subjective nuances.
Dorian L had a question.
Yeah.
Yes. This relates to both music and what you were telling us about meditation. You mentioned the things that make one roll one's eyes. I know that many of the disciplines of music performance are enhanced performance by getting the performer to imagine things that can't possibly be true.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, these can be beneficial because they happen to enhance performance. So meditation to me could be a very similar thing, that you're putting you're doing things to your mind that are based on nothing very scientific. You're putting thoughts in your mind that maybe are true or false, but it could be beneficial anyway. But us as humanists, and with an emphasis on rationality, we have a hard time swallowing that. Can you talk about that conflict and how you resolve it?
Yeah. I mean, I'll go to an extreme place and then I'll work my way back. Psychedelic drugs. When somebody takes a psychedelic drug, they will experience things that are not in tangible reality. However, it will still affect the way that they are engaging with their current reality. You can also look at mental illness. I told you I'm starting in the extremes and I'm working my way back. A disease like schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. Worked with an individual once who was completely consciously aware that they had schizophrenia, but it didn't matter because in their world there was a surveillance team set up in this person's apartment. She wouldn't go home because of it. So even though she intellectually understood that this wasn't real, she still went into her place and experienced all the emotions, all the fears of having a group of people that you don't know just set up all around. So that's kind of the most extreme just place of looking at intangible things that don't exist in the rational mind but still affect the way we engage with the world. So going back a step, one thing that mindfulness and like Stoic philosophy have in common with each other, one of the tenets in Stoicism, is that our perceived reality has more of an effect on the way we engage with the world than our objective reality itself does. A very tangible example that tends to work is, have you ever been in an argument with your spouse or your partner and you just can't get to the same point, and you're both rational people and just can't see eye to eye? When working in couples therapy, so first up, as a person who's been in a dispute with my partner, I know that I am completely right, and I know that everything I'm saying makes complete sense, and there's no way what you're saying makes any sense. I'm kind of making a joke. In couples therapy, when, a debate is filmed and it is then analyzed by a team of professional psychotherapists, it's pretty apparent that both sides were causing, oftentimes, not precisely 50-50, but oftentimes both sides are in the right in a lot of areas and in the wrong in a lot of areas, or just straight up misinterpreting what the other person's even trying to say or do. So that's one thing where the Stoics and mindfulness actually have a lot of comparable views on the world. Specifically regarding art and music in particular, because that's the field I'm most involved with. There are ways of taking an intangible concept and applying it through a different lens. So, for instance, at the mindfulness meditation retreat, it's taught by a Buddhist teacher. Buddhist teacher talks about breathing, spot on. Helps me calm down. Buddhist teacher teaches body scans, spot on. I am observing my body as is. Buddhist teacher makes a reference to my past lives and my future lives. Okay, that doesn't quite make sense to me at all. So if I can, through a Stoic lens, reevaluate the way I'm perceiving it, it's like, all right, I am speaking to somebody who is an expert at one very particular thing, and their perceived reality makes no sense in my world. So what I can do is I can take the many lives concept and apply it in a tangible way. For instance, 10 years ago, I was not the same person that I am today. 10 years from now, I will not be the same person that I am today. So in a way, I've experienced many lives through it goes into what's the thought experiment, where if you take a boat and you take a piece of wood off the boat and replace it with another piece of wood, eventually you've replaced all the pieces of wood over time. Is it the same boat? I don't know. I don't know. But the point is that that's what happens, with us. I mean, just on. I literally got a cut because I broke a mirror the other day, and this thing's been healing. The skin that was there it started to heal over. It's new skin in a certain light. So that's one way, is you can. It's like, all right, I am going to take the message of what you're trying to say. I'm going to throw out that it's not literally about many lives. And I'm going to reapply it to, all right, so this is just examining the fact that my life is moving through space and time, and it is constantly evolving, eventually coming to an end point, just as all things will. It's the same thing with music. I got an answer once from a music professor who is an atheist. So like just to be completely upfront, he's on the same page as I am, and I want to tell you an answer he gave. And because of how humans interact with one another, there's much more nuance with how we engage with particular relationships. But I was asking him, it was like, all right, like I know, like I am at this point of technical skill on the piano, and every time I listen to Bill Evans, famous jazz piano player, I just think, why can't I play like him, even though I technically have all the same skill as him? My atheist music professor went, hey man, music's out there already. You just gotta find the zone and bring it out through you. I don't even know what that means, but for whatever reason, it actually helped. I still don't actually have an answer, but I know that it definitely did something where it was like, okay, I need to stop worrying about if it sounds good or if it doesn't sound good. I need to just become, aware of my own surroundings and just be happy that I'm having this opportunity to play music. I'm going to pull up, there's a really great quote by bass player Charlie Hayden, who was the bass player of Ornette Coleman. He has a quote that actually applies to this beautifully. I'll put it in the chat once I find it. Musical style. Okay, cool. I learned at a very young age that music teaches you about life. When you're in the midst of improvisation, there is no yesterday and there is no tomorrow. There is just the moment that you are in. In that beautiful moment, you experience your true insignificance to the rest of the universe. It is then and only then that you can experience your true significance. So, I don't know. Did that answer?
Mike had that question. Have you heard of Lamont Young's?
Yes. I know Lamont. He has a place here called the Dream House, which is 6 simultaneous synthesizers, and it's a meditation chamber. And yeah, I used to volunteer there, and yeah, it's dope. It's a super dope place to go to because it's so finely tuned. He's really, really, really in tune with we call it microtonality. So the pitches. If you think about it in language, you know how in linguistics a baby pre-8 months old is able to perceive, I think it's 600 consonants and 200 vowels, but then over time eventually starts to hone into the specific language and the specific dialect of their surroundings. It's actually very similar to music. Like in India, for instance, they have technically 24 pitches that they utilize to make music. Nobody's like, there wasn't a meeting where it was like, all right, we're going to do 25. Everyone cool for the next couple thousand years? We're going to do 20. In Western culture, it's 12 pitches, give or take. It can be perceived as 15, but in a general sense, the way it's taught is 12. But even then, it changes based on regions. For instance, in the United States, orchestras tune to 440, which is the A pitch. It's 440 hertz. In Europe, they tune to 444. In Latin America, they tune to 442. Oh. Why? Sociological reasons. Much deeper thing. But anyways, Lamont is like, his entire musical language is based around this microtonal sphere. And he actually has a very cool concept where most of his music is tuned to either 60 hertz or 120 hertz. And the reason is that is the wave of electricity. And it is, the concept is that Western society's tonal center is at 120 hertz because that's what our air conditioners are. It's what our subways are. That's what our cars are. And it's somewhere between a B flat and an A sharp. It's like, you know, if you think of pitches like this, it's somewhere in the middle. And I will tell you from personal experience, if you go to a 4-hour Lamont Young concert and then you go into the subway in New York, you start to like you're in a very different mental space, just with the sonic universe around you. Cause it's like, whoa, like, I can actually hear that I'm like lining up to electrical sound. So yes, yeah, I love Lamont. Very, very cool guy.
I've got his well-tuned piano on LP.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's a skip in a couple areas, but man, he's got a Bossendorfer piano that's tuned precisely in just intonation.
Yeah.
And it's just like, when you hear the individual notes, you say, well, it's a little out of tune. But when he starts playing those tone chords and everything, each like frequency starts taking on its own part.
Yeah.
And it really envelops you.
The well-tuned piano is a piece by Lamont, where he has the entire piano tuned in open fifths and improvises for a very long time, and it's actually following this 120 hertz concept. And Michael, what you were saying? Oh, I've got a newborn, by the way, who's getting her diaper changed to the left of me. So, but yeah, it is one of those things where when you start to really get into the mental space of hearing all these subtle tunings, you start to hear just new colors and sounds, and you know, it's almost like taste sensations, but for your ears, where, you know, if you start to eat a type of cuisine that you're not familiar with, it may be kind of gross, but once you try it, like, it's like, okay, well, let me try it again, and it's like, I actually kind of like this. And once you start to dig into a different kind of cuisine, your taste buds start to explore the more subtleties of different foods, and I don't know. That's actually how I feel a lot with Lamont's music. Also, Michael, are you familiar with Ben Johnston?
I think I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, if you like the well-tuned piano, I have a strange feeling that you'll like Ben Johnston's music. He's completely in the same vein, but almost a step further. And he actually has a string quartet. I think it's string quartet number 4. That's an arrangement of Amazing Grace, and the way it moves through all these like subtle tonalities, it's stunning. It's really,
like
really
Gavin
stunning
Bryars.
stuff. Yeah. Who?
Gavin Bryars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I better let somebody else talk. I can talk to you all day.
Yeah.
Well, Dorian, we have a question from Lauren. Lauren Beauregard, can you come in, please?
This is extremely interesting to me. That conversation that you're having with Mike about Lamont Young. I have never heard of Lamont Young, but now I know for sure that I'm going to have to access that. And the reason is the following. The way you were talking about it reminded me completely of the first movement of a piece by Steve Reich called Music for 18 Musicians. And that first movement has the title Pulses. And just the way you were talking about the Lamont reminded me completely of the way that Pulses movement works. And so I guess I have a general question about minimalist music generally and how you think minimalist music relates to meditation.
So, I'm gonna make a slight religious joke, but the 4 horsemen of minimalist music would be Terry Riley, Lamont Young, Steve Reich, and Philip Glass. One of the things, like, I had a teacher once. These are long answers. I apologize, but so I had a teacher who was talking about Philip Glass's music once, and he was like, Philip Glass and Johannes Bach are doing the exact same things. It's just Bach repeats a phrase twice, and Philip Glass repeats it 124 times. But regarding harmony, same concept. So there is something about repetition that really connects to an altered state of consciousness. And I'll tell you a couple of just anecdotal pieces. Look at Peruvian shamanism. What is it? And this is actually this aligns also with some of the questions that were brought up about how do you relate to something that's very like irrational. So shamanism, in the Peruvian sense, it's about connecting to spirits. I don't believe in spirits. I will if there's evidence. Like, I'm down. But in a philosophical sense, it's like, okay, it may not be literally connecting with spirits, but you're entering into an altered state of consciousness, and there is something happening with your emotional processing while in that altered state of consciousness. Peruvian shamanism, the way that they induce you into that state is they take a single drum and they play a repetitive rhythm for a very, very, very long time. There is also something, it's a term called entrainment. And entrainment is unconscious movement to music or to sound. It is not exclusively experienced by humans, but it's mostly experienced by humans. So this is like if you put on YMCA and people start to move their head, that is entrainment. It wasn't like, all right, everybody tap your foot and move your head. Like, you're not doing that. Another example of entrainment is if an entire crowd is clapping together to a song. So there is something neurological and psychological about a repetitive rhythm that the human being locks into. And some of this is perceived that it relates to the heartbeat, which, if your heart is not doing a steady groove, there are issues. Same with circadian rhythm. It is really about a consistent flow of something. So now let's apply all of this to minimalist music. So minimalist music, the four examples. I am seeing young. It's young as in like Young, not like Carl Jung. So minimalist music is really taking a lot of either indigenous concepts or ancient spiritual concepts and just applying it to the Western orchestra or the modern instrumentation, modern music. So Steve Reich, for instance, he does a thing where he has one repetitive pattern and the exact same repetitive pattern except slightly higher in tempo, and it ends up creating a wave effect, literally like it creates a pulse. So there is something about repetition that is very inherent in the human experience that gets us into an altered state of consciousness, which meditation is a part of. And I mean, it's not unrealistic to, look at the source material. Steve Reich developed a lot of his musical practices from travels over to Ghana to study with drumming masters, and also incorporating ancient Jewish music that is used for spiritual purposes. Lamont Young and Terry Riley A lot of theirs is based on Indian classical music, music from 2,000 years ago. Philip Glass, a lot of his ideas is that it comes from being in a meditative state, playing at the piano, and the act of playing a simple pattern over and over and over again. One last point just to this is on an anecdotal level. So I play a lot of dance classes, high-level professional dancers, which if you ever want to feel out of shape, just play for professional dancers. Like, they just casually put their leg above their head, talking to you as if it's Tuesday. I'm like, still trying to wake up. But anyways, there was one class at New York University I was playing, and the teacher asked me to play something like Philip Glass. And what the teacher was wanting was to basically create a meditative space while the dancers had 30 minutes to improvise together. And I had never actually played Philip Glass at this point, like for real Philip Glass. I had checked out his music, all of those sorts of things, but I had never actually sat down at the piano and played for 30 minutes, like 3 patterns that, over a 30-minute period. And there was this element where I started to zone in to my fingertips and was literally paying attention to just the way it was processing, like in a physical motion, on each one of the keys, to the point where I started to notice a little bit of sweat was starting to form under my fingertip, because it was literally playing the same repetitive spot over and over and over and over again, something I had never done as a pianist of 20 years, playing on the same exact note for that long period of time. And the psychological experience of ecstasy when the chord changed, it was one of those all of a sudden, it was like we're in a new dimension now. Like we were in this space and now we're in this space. So that's an anecdotal experience that I had with Philip Glass's music specifically. So yeah. Yes.
Michael had a story, but I'm going to let people read that in the chat. The next real question comes up. Do you think, it's from Hank, Rob, do you think the point of meditation is to change what is, become calm if you're fearful, or to be present with what is, be present with fear, whether it changes or not?
It is not about changing what is going to happen. I'll tell you a very good example. I have a fear of spiders. I love spiders. I respect spiders. I think they do an incredible service to planet Earth. I just don't want to see close-up pictures of their face, and I don't want them to crawl on me. Because I am a regular meditator, and I have come to terms with my love and respect and admiration for spiders, it does not change the fact that when one surprises me, that I still have the visceral response. The response is going to happen whether I want it to or not. I don't have to give that fear more power than just the fear existing in itself. So one of the biggest ways to tell if a meditation practice is a scam or if it is legit is what they're promising you. And if they're promising that things are going to go away, it's not true. Meditation is about becoming aware that these things are going to happen and not giving it more power than need be. Really, I use this example specifically with Helen with our last course was, if I took a stick of butter and threw it in a river and I through sheer mental strength willed the butter to sink to the bottom of the river, it's not going to do that. It will not do it. It will have to take some kind of intervention. Either me putting the butter in a container and pushing it down, or you know, changing the chemical makeup of the butter. So like there are things that need to take place. Post-traumatic stress disorder, something that I do have. I would love to live in a world where I don't have panic attacks when something in a social setting gets intense. I would love that. However, it is not going away anytime soon. Through a meditation practice, I've been able to examine when I'm having a panic attack, and I don't need to give that panic attack more strength. I can, to the point where I can literally say to my wife, hey, I'm having a thing. Can you give me a second? And we have already, through other mindfulness practices, I've already been open with her about realizing these things. So I can literally take 10 minutes and just sit and calm down and go on with my life. In fact, I've even grown to sort of have a weird love relationship with my PTSD, because in a weird way, it's almost like a really hyperactive close friend who's really just trying to make sure I'm safe. It's like, whoa, things are going awry. We got to get out of here. You know, it's like, that's what's going on. It doesn't understand, because it's not a conscious being. It doesn't understand that it's like, dude, you're just at like a dinner party. Like, you know, somebody said something kind of rude to you. That doesn't mean you have to, you know. So it does not change you beyond it gives tools to examine what you're going through in a different way. Meditation practice led me to get therapy. Meditation practice led me to go see a psychiatrist to get medication for my trauma. Meditation also led me to realize that I was drinking too much at one point in my life as a coping mechanism to numb the agony that I was in, but alcohol wasn't actually helping. It would numb it for a moment, and then it would come back. Or it would numb it for a moment and then actually make it worse. Plus weight gain, plus, you know, all the other factors that can be involved. So it will not change anything. It will simply allow. It's a coping skill. It's a tool. It's something that you can take and use to analyze.
Is there a reason? I'm the guy who asked that.
Yes.
Is there a reason that you said, I'll say to my wife, I'm having a thing, and then I'll take 10 minutes to calm down? You said it that way. You didn't say, I'll take 10 minutes to discern what is happening. Is there a reason that you said the first thing rather than the second?
The reason I said the first as opposed to the second is the second happened 10 years ago. There was a point when I was realizing, it was like, wow, I am having a heart rate. My heart rate's going up right now. I wonder why that is. And it was like, okay, anytime I'm in a circumstance where I feel like I'm being spoken down to, my heart rate goes up. When my heart rate goes up, I get more frantic, more irrational. So the second thing is something that I have done, but the reason I gave the first answer is now just in the way of being is I am aware when my heart rate's going up. I know what's happening. And so I'll take 10 minutes generally to sit and calm down, because I know from previous examinations that it is a panic attack taking place when certain physical sensations are arising. Did that answer?
So I don't mean to be hard on you.
Oh, no, you're cool. I like this.
But it does sound like I will take 10 minutes to make the experience that I'm having change. I'm energetic, and I'm going to do something to be less energetic.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound like be with it. That sounds like change it.
This is a great question because I do have an answer. So I just got really excited about getting to answer this. So in the past, in my personal experiences with panic attacks, it would be I would get a racing heart rate. I would start to get really nervous. I would enclose into myself, and I would eventually, in some cases, have to leave the circumstance I was in. PTSD is different for everybody. Some people it's racing thoughts. I was never racing thoughts. Mine has always been physical. Everybody's different. So, in the past, I would have a panic attack that may last a few hours without knowing that's what was going on. And in response to the high energy rising, I would do more destructive behaviors. Get drunk is a perfect one. Say something very rude or harsh to somebody I care about who didn't do anything wrong. Snap at people. Go into, as I said, like a lot of my reaction was to go internally, close myself off for a couple days. Like, all right. Also, have fear if people ask me to go to social events. Hey, man, we're going to a club tonight. Oh, no, I'm not going to go today. Not telling, oh, dude, no, it's going to be fun. For you, it's fun. For me, it's not. I don't know if it's not going to be fun. So all of that is past experiences. The specific example of the taking 10 minutes is that I've come to realize that when the anxiety kicks in, it takes about, for my own personal experience, about 10 minutes for it to get really intense and then calm down. Whereas in the past, it would get really intense and I wouldn't know how to respond to it. And I would almost make it worse and make it worse and make it worse. So it's not that it isn't to change something, because that is definitely for sure a thing taking place. But in a almost more nuanced analysis of it, it's that on its own, it's a 10-minute flare up and disintegrates. Whereas if I don't take that 10 minutes to just kind of let it arise and pass away, I can go into a 4-day cycle of something at its worst, which has happened. 4-day cycle of just being in my room, just, in my apartment, not doing anything, not contacting people.
So do you think it is fair to say that what I do is I take time to not fuel this experience so that it does whatever it would do on its own?
Yes.
And a side effect, not the point, but a side effect of simply allowing whatever it does on its own is I return to some level that you might call calm, some level that I prefer rather than the one I started with.
Yes, that is fair. Another way to think about it is actually through grieving, the grieving process. If you lose somebody close to you, not grieving might be a preferable mental space. However, the grief is still going to happen. An unhealthy grieving process is expanding to, you can make it last for months or even years. the grieving process of a loved one where somebody finds themselves calming themselves down with substance, or someone just can't get past the loss of this important individual. So through a more healthy processing is that, you know, if somebody you lose, if you are going to lose somebody close to you, you are going to grieve, whether or not you want to grieve or not. And a healthy grieving process is to let the grieving flow very fluidly and eventually come back to a state of normalcy.
So I'm fond of saying that sorrow is like poop. It'll pass through you if you let it. It sounds like you're saying something the same.
That is the most elegant example I've heard to date. And yeah, that totally, it's exactly like that.
Thank you for your time, and I apologize to anyone whose time I have impinged on.
Oh, you did good. We've got one time for a quick answer, I think, from Sheila Pastori. I'm wondering if religious views, and I'm going to spell the word because I'm deavening, Davenning, while praying is entrainment.
Who asked the question? Sorry.
Sheila Pastori is the last question.
Okay, cool.
It might only be a Jewish person who would understand what davening is. Davening.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. What is it?
Have you ever seen in a film, perhaps, in a synagogue, the Jewish men are praying, and while they're praying, they're going like this. And that's called davening. And it's a rhythm that repeats and repeats and repeats. And I wondered if that would be could be called entrainment that you described earlier.
It may not literally be entrainment, because entrainment is sound activated, but entrainment is a. Oh yes.
Well, they are singing out loud, very repetitively, very monotonously. It's really hard to take if you're not an old Jewish religious person doing it, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Then yes, I would say that entrainment is taking place.
Possibly, anyway.
Yeah. You know, the thing about I mean, this is a humanist call, so I feel totally safe talking this way. I've had like a lot of ups and downs with my relationship to religion, and right now I'm in sort of an interesting space where, without naming names, there was a political figure in the last couple of years who popped up where I found myself defending groups of people and beliefs that I never thought would happen. For instance, a devout Muslim. All of a sudden, I am finding myself being like, whoa, like, I don't disagree, or I don't agree with, you know, what this person's fundamental beliefs are, but we can't generalize an entire group of people based on their beliefs on a minority of incredibly violent individuals when there is a much larger majority of you know, so like I've had kind of a shift in my analysis of religion and spiritual practice, where it used to be atheist versus theist. That was the way I was viewing it. And recently it has shifted to mysticism versus dogmatism or fundamentalism. And there's a lot of interesting, and this, so sorry, we're getting to the end of our time, and this just opened up a 35-year dialogue. But, you know, there is a difference with Jesus Christ the Messiah versus Jesus Christ the ancient philosopher. There is a difference with the Buddha being the enlightened chosen one versus Buddha, the ancient philosopher. There are elements of the Buddhist teaching, or Jesus's teachings that still apply to I still utilize them. However, there are a lot of things that we can scrape away. It's like, okay, that's a 2,000-year-old really smart individual for their era, talking in their language, talking in their understanding of the world, that just doesn't apply in a literal sense to the modern concept. I mean, honestly, we can look at old comedians that we thought were hilarious at one point in time, but you look through a new lens of and it's like, ooh, that joke doesn't quite work as well knowing what we know now. This happens in film all the time. One of my gigs is I do silent film accompanying, and these are movies from the 20s, and they're amazing. Like they're so awesome to work with and to play with, but there is some horrific racism in these movies that you can literally objectively look at and be like, different time, different world. I can still appreciate the craft. I can still appreciate the overall message, but I don't. This one very particular part, I'm going to dismiss that entirely. So anyways, all of this to kind of get into the davening practice and entrainment is there is something about the mystic. Let me put it this way. I can hang out with an old Catholic woman who's out for human rights more than I can hang out with an atheist who wants to ban people from entering the country, or who has economic policies that harm poor people. And in a strange way, if we shift some of the words, we can actually almost be talking about the same thing in a philosophical sense. There is obviously nuance. There are more specific things that there just won't be any agreement in ever. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to have these moments. But anyway, so the way that I've kind of been dividing it lately is the mystical person, and I'm using mystic the same way I'm using spiritual. All it is somebody who is having an experience through their own understanding of the world that is some form of altered state of consciousness. So I can, through a humanist lens, utilize meditation or utilize music improvisation to get into a space. So just the last point of it is, whereas somebody who is of an orthodoxy state of mind, they often view something as an outside source, something that you have to follow, something that you have to have strict experience, or strict abiding to, which can apply to fascists who are atheists. Yeah. They cannot believe in a god and still have an insanely dogmatic view of the world, and if
you gave us much more than I was looking for. Thank you. And thank you for mentioning two of my favorite performers, Bill Evans and Charlie Hayden. I love them. Thank you.
Yes.
You have given us such a rich presentation with music and philosophy, and I think you heard the engagement in everyone's voices, that they were really enjoying this. So thank you so much.